Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. As you guys can tell, it is obviously snowing. Now, for a lot of you this may not be a lot of snow, may not be a big deal, but for those of you that don't know, I live here in the southern United States, and for us, this may as well be the snow apocalypse. Now, I wasn't really keen about getting out on a day like today, but I was a little bit bored, and I was just inside reading some Facebook photography groups that I follow. And I saw a lady on there named Lisa, and she was wondering how to take photographs in the snow. Apparently she's tried before, and she couldn't get the results she wanted. So I decided to make a quick tutorial video about it. Now, one of the main things that happens whenever you start trying to take photographs in snow is basically the camera's metering system gets thrown off a bit. And I'll go ahead and post a link to my Nikon metering video to kind of explain to you kind of how that works in more detail. But in short, your metering system in your camera is designed to set up its exposure, or set up the camera's exposure, based upon a predetermined value. And that predetermined value is 18% gray. Now, obviously if we're talking about snow, snow is, you know, if you try to balance out snow to 18% gray, the camera's going to see lots and lots of white. It's going to try to underexpose the snow some to make it work out and be the right brightness. But that has a tendency to make the snow look, well, very, very gray. Also, if you have a subject in your photograph other than the snow, especially if your subject happens to have, you know, it's a person, if they have darker skin tone, it's just not going to work out. You're going to end up with your subject much, much darker, and the snow is going to be the right exposure. So the easiest way to deal with this is to use exposure compensation on your camera. If you're shooting in something like aperture priority or program or shutter priority, you can hit the exposure compensation button on your camera, and you can adjust your metering and bias it more towards overexposure, and that will take care of the situation. For snowy situations, most of the time I like to set the camera to about +1, and I'll go ahead and show you guys what the difference is like. I'm going to start out by taking a photograph with no exposure compensation and show you what that's like, and then I'll go ahead and take a photograph with the exposure compensation set to +1. And for the sake of this demo, I'm just using aperture priority. So let's go ahead and give that a go and see how things come out. Alright, so sure enough, you can see that was definitely underexposed. And the fact that I have a little bit darker skin tone is certainly not helping anything either. So yeah, the snow looks about the right brightness, but I look pretty plain and drab. Of course, I'm kind of cold too. But yeah, you get the idea. Definitely not the exposure we want. Now let's go ahead and give this the same sort of thing. We're going to do the same exact thing again. Still on aperture priority, 100 ISO, f4. But now I'm going to set the camera to overexpose by 1 stop. And I'm going to just use the exposure compensation and go over to +1. So let's give that a go. And there you have it, the right exposure. I found that on most cameras, +1 works out to be right whenever taking snow photos. But your mileage may vary a little bit depending on your subject and your camera. To change your exposure compensation, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of I'll put a few little icons on the screen here. But basically there's a button on your camera that has a little plus and minus. And on most cameras, like on the D800 I'm using today, that exposure compensation setting is changed by pressing and holding the button and then rotating the camera's main command dial. Pretty much every DSLR is going to have the exposure compensation button, and it's going to be changed in a similar fashion. If you have questions about this tutorial, or about how to change your exposure compensation on your particular camera, feel free to write me in the comments below. I, in the meantime, am going to go and get some hot chocolate because, like I told you guys, it's cold out here and we're not used to this. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.